And again, this is news today. Let's get into the first story. Medical microbiologist at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Pierre Labi, says a national policy on antibiotic is crucial if Ghana is to counter the growing incidence of antibiotic resistance. Speaking on the AM show, Dr. Pierre Labi also noted monitoring of antibiotic resistance is also essential.
It's a simple thing. Without the antibiotics, you do not have resistance. See, in every large population of bacteria, which usually will cause infections, there are a few cells that will be resistant or would have resistant genes in them. So if you expose them to the antibiotic over a period of time, it wipes out the susceptible ones or the ones that are not resistant. So they die out and then the resistant ones remain. So over time, the resistant ones proliferate and start causing disease, and then you start spreading them around. So without the antibiotic, you don't select. So if you have a cold, which is a virus, okay, and you take say amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, or
that's an antibiotic.
It's an antibiotic. You don't need it, but we have bacteria in our body, in our guts, natural. I mean, they are there. You are exposing them to these antibiotics, and you will be wiping out the ones that are susceptible and leaving out the ones that are resistant, and they would in turn probably cause an infection the next time. This is a big problem. It's a lot of bacteria that we have that cause disease in man are also found in animals. So using antibiotics in there also exposes the same bacteria to antibiotic pressure, and then the resistance also evolves in them as well. So we need policies to protect the few antibiotics that we have. Policies that would and policies that are enforced, for example, preventing over-the-counter sale of antibiotics. We need a national policy on antibiotics. I think it's something that the ministry is seriously looking at now, so that we would have certain antibiotics that are restricted and how it's supposed to be used. And we need to monitor resistance as a nation, so that we know which antibiotics we are losing. Okay, so we know, okay, these organisms are there, so we know the steps to put in place. Like malaria, you know, they were monitoring malaria resistance. They got to a certain percent point, they decided no, chloroquine is not effective again, let's switch something else. So we need something like that. So with STIs, the major thing is right now is when it comes to gonorrhea especially, where we are now beginning to see resistance to ceftriaxone, which is
what's that?
It's an antibiotic.
Okay. It's
an antibiotic. It's the drug we use for treating gonorrhea. Okay. Before we were using penicillin. Now we had a problem of resistance. Quite a significant population of gonorrhea isolates became resistant to penicillin. So we decided to switch to ceftriaxone. Now we have a report of resistant strains of gonorrhea.
Well, now the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research is taking steps to commercialize some of its technologies, which have for a while now been on the shelves. Courtesy the CSIR Cortvet initiative, the institute is seeking to build a sustainable system for partnership with the private sector to commercialize these innovations.
According to Director of Science and Technology, Policy and Research at the Institute, the CSIR Cortvet initiative is a market-oriented project under the Component 2 of the Ghana Skills Development Project, which seeks to bridge the gap between Ghana's research institutions and the private sector.
What they do in the research institutions seem not to end up with technologies and innovations that are transferred into the private sector for serious business. And so there's that gap. And it's important that as a nation we address that gap. We want to make sure that the technologies and innovations that are produced in the research institutions get transferred into the private sector for serious business.
He further explains the research is currently building the capacity of researchers and scientists in various fields of discipline under the new project.
Under the project, we are required to identify specific technologies or innovations that have been developed in the CSIR, and we are required to identify entrepreneurs, link up with them, we form partnership with them, and commercialize those technologies.
The CSIR CODVET program is to develop and implement a new technology transfer system linked to an existing structures that ensures the effective development and transfer of innovations to the private sector. Matilda Pamagan for Joy News.
Well, with recent developments in the education sector, the ministry is taking its turn at the Meet the Press briefing at the Ministry of Information. Matilda Magas, therefore, has joined me over the telephone. Hello, Matilda. Hello, Matilda.
Hello, I can hear you.
Right, tell us what's been happening there.
This is the time for the education sector, who has also taken their turn in the Meet the Press session, and it's been addressed by the Minister, Professor Nana Jim-Kukwajima, who she just started not long ago, and she has been talking, most of them, about the achievements over this period and the review, and some of the interventions government is also putting in place to support the educational sector, most particularly where she reiterated government's commitment to this progressive free education policy, which she's saying that it's currently with the cabinet, who are going to look into it and put the necessary measures to its full implementation. And so she also made mention of issues regarding these fees charged by the second cycle institutions, and she has already given out a directive that if heads of schools can really justify their means to really charge this fees that they are talking about, they should bring out proposals, and then there will be deliberations on it to see how best to address it. But the most pertinent issue we are really hoping that she talks soon about is this Kotag and Nagrat issue, which has generated a lot of concerns among the general public. We are still hoping that she mentions that in her address soon. So we'll be getting in touch with her to find out what exactly government is doing to address this Kotag issue, which is already getting to the third week, which is 21 days, which would mean that most of the students would have to pack their bags and come back home. So we'll be getting in touch with her to speak to her and find out what government is doing about it.
Right, but you mentioned that she was outlining some measures to curtail some of the challenges within the education sector. Could you take us through some of them?
Well, first of all, she mentioned that government zero tolerance to teacher absenteeism, which she talked at length on this, where she made mention of efforts that government is putting in place to address some of these concerns of teacher absenteeism. And also she talked about the progressive free education policy, which government is also putting measures in place. For now, it's already in draft, and the cabinet is looking into it to see out how best this policy can be well implemented. And she also talked about the 200 community day SHS, which will be, the president has already inaugurated the construction of the first seat. So she's still on it, talking about some of these interventions that the ministry is putting in place to address the educational sector.
We're appreciative of your time. Thank you very much for that information, Matilda Wemega. But you recall that national security is once again pulled down 2 security posts and the construction at the Okpongolo entrance of the University of Ghana. You were there earlier today. You told us that indeed the university administration was locked up in a meeting concerning this particular matter. What else were you able to gather?
Well, I was trying to get in touch with Selamwa, the PR for the university, to find out what exactly has been the outcome of this meeting, but I've still not been able to get in touch with her. But what I gathered from some sources around, particularly the security men at post at the university, was that what the university was actually putting up wasn't a toll booth. According to them, it's a security observation post, which the university is putting in place. As to whether there has been any communication between the university and then the national security there hasn't been anything of that sort. So I'm sure that is where it looks like there's a bit of confusion between the two parties. So we'll get to them and find out the real issue, as they can also find out from the university authorities what's the making of this latest development.
I see. Pleasure talking to you, Matilda. But now, if you've been watching Joy News, you remember that Matilda, on her visits to the University of Ghana campus, spoke to some students. Let's have a playback of that.
Will take several weeks. So what's happened this morning away from here, in what has been a carefully choreographed day, is that the Spanish cabinet have been meeting.
A major concern when it comes to that angle, yeah.
So you think something should...
Yeah, something to be done about it.
So that this place will not be used as a tour. What do you make out of it?
Wow, I think that will be, that's something that I don't think is so realistic, because they have a security kind of point here where security men are there to ensure that all vehicles that come in without university ticket, especially the commercial ones, are being inspected. And so I don't think that's so much of a problem, because putting up the toll will not ensure that people coming here are not actually robbers, but then would just be taking money from them. So I don't see how that has got to do with the security of the students in any way.
All right, thank you so much. You're welcome. Okay, so we have been speaking to some of the students of the University of Ghana campus who have shared some of their thoughts. We also made to understand that the university authorities are currently in a meeting. As and when they finish with this meeting, we'll try and get to them and speak to them to find out what exactly they make out of this.
Right, so that was earlier today, just before she left the campus of the University of Ghana. There's more hurt. You don't want to miss out on what we have for you on News Today. I'll be right back. I'm glad you could stay on. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency's promised to investigate the liquid substance which surfaced on the drains of Agbogbloshie. Although it is not clear what the liquid is, residents in the area claim it is diesel. Meanwhile, the head of public affairs at the EP, Angelina Mensah, says the agency will test the substance and make its findings known by Tuesday, June 10, 2014. Here's a report by Ridwan Karim Osman.
Rushed by residents of Agbogbloshie last Saturday to collect a substance suspected to be diesel in the drainage at Agbogbloshie. Some young men who had collected liters of the liquid were convinced the substance was diesel, but could not tell how it got to the drain.
This is the 4 years. It come already. This is the second time. But always if we can, we have to try to get our own, then we say to the drivers, then we should buy. But we didn't know actually problem is there, is bring the fuel for us, that is. It was one of my friend. The 4 years time he came, one of my friend was around. Me with him make the connection to get some. Then I was coming with bank. We called me that some come again today. Then we should come and get some again. That is the plan. We will enter inside the water, then we'll get some.
So can you tell us the number of barrels that have been collected so far? Because you told me earlier a lot of people were here to, drill.
More than 200 jerrycan, more than 300 jerrycan, more than.
On Monday, the news team, having collected samples of the liquid, visited the office of the Environmental Protection Agency to seek some answers. We are here to present to them the sample and find out what exactly will be going into the activities as far as testing this liquid is concerned. And so, madam, this is the liquid, and I just want you to tell us what exactly would you be doing with the liquid?
The Environmental Protection Agency is very happy and well done. What we're going to do is to analyze it. I'll take you to our laboratories, which is downstairs, to see what kind of equipment we have. At this particular moment, we cannot say whether it's diesel or petrol, but until the laboratory technicians have actually done their test, would know the efficacy, the content of this material you've brought. However, as a precaution, the next time you hear of such spills, kindly call the Environmental Protection Agency to go along with you. There is a way we gather samples to check how it should be. We do not just gather the sample because we gather it. This container might even affect the efficacy of whatever you've brought. But all the same, we will have a look at it and then give you the result when analysis is ready. So next time, please try and wear protective clothing, cover your nose because the smell coming out of this is very strong.
The EPA officials commended Joy News for bringing the issue to their attention and assured the substance will be taken to the laboratory for examination.
Now, Parliament has postponed the date for the resumption of business of House from Tuesday, June 3 to Tuesday, June 10. Parliament initially announced plans to resume business on Tuesday, May 27, 2014. The date was, however, postponed to June 3, 2014. A press statement issued by clerk to Parliament noted that the leadership of Parliament has again postponed its resumption date to June 10. But what meaning can we make of this as a Ghanaian people? I'm joined over the telephone by political scientist Dr. Evans Agre-Dako. Thank you very much for joining us here on News Today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
What meaning do you make into this?
It's worrying. You know, Parliament, I would say, is a democratic face, you know, of our system because of the number of representation that we have in there. We have an institution that is expected to serve as a representative body. We have an institution that is expected to serve as an oversight over the activities of, especially the executive. We have an institution that must ensure that the public policies and programs are crafted to address some of the fundamental problems that confront this nation. And the Parliament has a mandate. They have a schedule. They have a serious, if you look at they have a session which is almost like a year. And you don't forget that normally the time that is allocated for deliberation is critical to how effective a particular piece of bill will receive the attention, you know, of Parliament. So if you have all these postponements, for me it's worrying, and we need proper explanation. Is it the explanation that, oh, Parliament will come, you know, because it's at the discretion of the Speaker, is not good enough. They have a mandate. They have a responsibility towards all of us. Wherever the money is, they must find the money and reorganize and deal with the business of the governance of this state. Yes.
How do we then demand that from Parliament, that we want an explanation for your inability to come to the House to do business for us?
Well, all of us. Collectively, I mean, the media, you have a responsibility. Civil society organizations must be interested. Individuals, academics, researchers must all be interested. You see, we need to figure out, of course, I agree, and I know that Parliament in session is really Parliament at a public exhibition, but Parliament in the committee rooms is real Parliament at work. That is what we normally know. But, you see, so if the committees are working, fine, it's the Parliament which is working. But I believe that the Parliament also has, they have a whole schedule for a year, which is a session, and therefore, if you postpone, you know, several settings, what it means that what you are doing is that you are going to do some crash program as far as the major issues that will be confronted, you know, with are concerned. And for me, that will mean that we are going to engage in some quick fixes. Perhaps a short-circuiting some of the key decisions that we have to take. But you see, bills, public policy and programs, you know, loan agreement and all of that, you need to do due diligence. You need to do due diligence, and it takes time. And what it means is that we need the time that is usually allocated for some of the deliberations are carefully, in my view, are carefully crafted such that the dividend will near to the benefit of all of us. So if you short-circuit some of the processes, what will mean is that if you are not careful, you will have a lot of policy slippages, because then shoddy work will likely, you know, result as a result, and of course that may undermine enduring democratic systems that we are very much interested in. For me, the critical point, procedurally, yes, the procedures are as important as the conclusion. Then when it comes to substantive issues, what we are looking out for will be the quality of the decisions that will emanate from such an important institution. And for me, time is of the essence.
And so that's how you see it impacting on governance. But let's talk about the reasons we've had so far why Parliament is unable to reconvene at the House. So, I mean, Parliament has debunked the fact that there is no money for them to come back. But then it's told us that some of them are caught up in some projects. Is that reason enough for them to stay away from business of the House?
You see, we have always talked about the lack of financial autonomy of Parliament as a serious, limiting factor, as far as, this Parliament, our Parliament is concerned. Now, if you look at the institutional architecture of our Parliament, it fundamentally relies on the executive for all the financial, requirements, basically. And for me, that is one critical area that really limits the effectiveness, of our Parliament. How do we ensure that the Parliament will have a stream of resources that will help us prosecute its major, its public, its agenda, basically? Now, if you have to rely on the executive, and you have to rely on the executive on what we call item by item, determination of how much resources that perhaps you need to really do your work, then there is a tendency that any time the executive is cash-strapped or the nation is cash-strapped, then, of course, obviously, the Parliament, the activities of the Parliament will be undermined. So for me, the issue of no money, perhaps, is a good, we must learn some lessons from that and see how best we can reconfigure our institutional architecture to ensure some financial autonomy for that institution so that they can continue to perform, and so that they won't use money or lack of money as one of the means or the factors for non-performance, so to speak. Of course, yes, if you talk about others engaged in some other activities, well, I believe that the Parliament itself knew that these activities were on. They have a program, they have their own schedules, they know when and when, the various committees will be engaged in some of the deliberations and some consultations that they have to undertake. So all these things are critical. And if you have a schedule and you know that all these things will come on and you factor all of them into your program, I don't see why that could be an excuse for Parliament, to convene, for instance, on inability to come back and engage in the real business of governance of the state. Yes.
How do we even begin to make Parliament independent financially?
Well, you see, we need to look at, of course, obviously, the power of the purse. They have the power of the purse. But if you look at how, budgets are presented and all the processes by which they go through to get their money, among others, it's still the power of the purse still rests with the executive. And so if you have an executive which is perhaps not too keen in the activities, especially those activities that border on oversight, it's just like, you relying on a suspect, okay? Relying on a suspect for the requisite financial wherewithal to be able to investigate him. You've lost the game on your way to Damascus. So fundamentally, we need to figure out whether we cannot insulate them from this item by item, issues. And maybe the way the judiciary, is able to assess its resources, but without necessarily going through the rigorous, budgetary process where the Minister of Finance will then determine whether there's money or not. These areas must be explored. Maybe I'm looking at a situation where we can adopt the method that is used, for instance, for the judiciary, so that the Parliament will have some semblance of financial autonomy, some reasonable autonomy, as it were. Of course, you can't have 100% autonomy, but some reasonable autonomy that will help the Parliament as an institution conduct the business that it has to conduct. But the current arrangement, I have indicated in one of my thesis that is really going to undermine the effectiveness of Parliament. And I'm not surprised at all that the lack of money is now being used as one of the factors for Parliament's ability to convene.
Right.
That for me, it's not good enough for a democratic country, a country that is increasingly becoming a good boy as far as good governance is concerned. We need to let the institutions fire on all cylinders, and we need to find the resources to be able to undertake this important democratic project. Yes.
Pleasure talking to you, Dr. Agridako. Dr.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Is a political scientist. Now, whether you're a business or an individual consumer of power here in the country, you need a solution to the current power crisis. But what is the solution? I'll tell you when I come back. I'm glad you stayed on for this very important segment, especially with the story we're starting with. It comes with a solution for many of our energy situation here we have in the country. So what is that solution? The Africa Center for Energy Policy says we would need a miracle to stop the Bui power plant from shutting down completely. My colleague Nia Akrofi Smart Abe spoke with John Peter Amewu of ASEP.
It's a regulatory dam. And so if you want to deploy the whole of the 400 megawatts of Bui dam, it only lasts for maximum of 6 months if you attempt to do that. If you deploy the whole of the you will break the dam. And so the difficulties we are experiencing now is because we try to put a lot of pressure on the Bui dam. But of course we have no option than to do that. Okay? And that is why we are here. You see, the difficulty for us as a country is what my good friend had already stated. We need at least about 400 megawatts as a reserve capacity, either spinning reserve or available reserve at any point in time, which we can call upon when we need, we are involved in crises like what we have now. We don't have that as a country. And so there is little we can do. There is little we can do. Nothing at all we can do. But the only thing we can do is to resort to demand-side management, which is a do-so. I don't see what we can do now as a country. Don't forget the 5-year cycle of the Akosombo Dam is this year running to next year, when we are expected to receive a little water in the dam, which will mean that Akosombo is going to experience similar problems by next year because of the level of flow. Don't forget the Bui is the upper dam, and the same water that flows to the lower dam here at Akosombo. And so gradually, Akosombo is going to experience the same problem. And the water cycle, in terms of the difficulties that we experience, is after every 5 years. And we are right in the year now. Akosombo is going to experience that same problem. And that is why we keep on saying that our power problem running from 2015 to 2016, 17 is going to be worse if no aggressive mechanism is put in place to address the problem.
Because
there is a little we can do now. The only thing we can do in the short term for now is the demand-side management, which is the do some. In the long run, we can build out more generation plants. But if you build a generation plant, you have to fire them with a cheaper fuel, which is the gas. We can build a generation plant and fire them with light crude. We have a lot of, we have some of the plants there which, feed on light crude. Government cannot buy the light crude because of the cost-sensitive element of it. That is why those plants are not running. So if you want to fire your plant with gas, then you must make gas available. The only way we can make gas available is either internally, because gas, as I stated, is a regional commodity. If you don't want to get the gas internally, then you can bring the gas through what we call the LNG processes, which of course is very expensive in terms of cost, and you need a long-term planning to arrive at that. So, I see a doom for this country in terms of our energy resources.
All right, thank you very much, Joe.
Well, that's the solution we might need to solve our energy crisis here in the country. Let's move away from that briefly. Talk about insurance now. And insurance companies are said to have seen a decline in their premium incomes for the month of April. This has been attributed to the No Premium, No Cover policy directive issued by the National Insurance Commission earlier this year. Though the Ghana Insurance Association supports the policy, it says it should have been introduced a lot earlier.
President of the Insurance Association, Kwame Gazo Agbenyeze, cites the case of the Metropolitan Insurance Company. He says saw its budgeted premium income for April decline by almost a quarter.
And we made enough arrangements that people will be able to buy policies on short-term basis. That is, if you have the money to pay 50% of the premium, then they'll give you a cover which is appropriate to that period, so that when you get the balance of the premium due, you can bring it, and then the policy will be extended to the end of the year. So everybody will be able to, provided that you are prepared to pay some portion of the premium, you will be given a cover that is appropriate, which will be appropriate for the period. So people should not, kind of shy away from insurance because they have liquidity problems. They should talk to the insurance company what amount of money you have, you pay, and then you'll be given a cover appropriate to that. What we will not do is to give you a full year's cover when you have not fully paid your premium.
He's advising clients to consider buy short-term policies if they can't afford to pay the annual premium upfront rather than go without any cover at all.
In April, at least from the point of view of my company and some companies I've talked to, the expected premium income that the targets were not met, which means that if you have in your budget to have X amount of money, at the end of the month we did not realize it, and it is principally due to the fact that people have to readjust, because if you don't pay the full premium, you are not giving cover. So naturally, people who didn't have the money ready did not come to renew or take insurance policy. So we experienced some fall in the revenue that we recorded for April. Our April budget, for example, we underperformed by almost 25% on the budget that we had for April. And even though there might be other causes, but the major factor is that some of the businesses were not renewed, and some of them were converted from comprehensive to third party, which actually gave us a lower premium.
Well, Finance Minister Seth Terkper has justified moves for a possible issue of Ghana's third Eurobond in July despite concerns of unfavorable market conditions. Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, has warned Ghana could be taking on too much debt in dollars through the issuance of the Eurobond. She says the practice has the potential to further harm the country's economy. Well, the National Development Planning Commission is waded into the country's debt stock debate with a call on government to work on minimizing Ghana's debts. Senior policy analyst and technical assistant to the NDPC, Director General Kenneth Owusu, who describes the current state of the economy as challenging, also wants government to drive down the interest rates to support the creation of more businesses.
The National Development Planning Commission is holding a 5-day stakeholders consultative meeting with research and academia to build consensus on the National Development Agenda for 2014 to 2017, according to the senior policy analyst and technical assistant to the NDPC. Director General. The macroeconomic policy for the medium term would focus on improving monetary policy, fiscal and financial management.
When we're doing the assessment in 2013 for the current medium-term policy, this same scenario began to play again. But the interesting dimension is that if you do the analysis, though you saw fiscal slippages in 2008, the sources of those slippages in 2012, 2013 were different going forward. So it's in the light of that we made some proposal in the current framework to address those fiscal slippages. Macroeconomic policy over the medium term 2014 to 2017 is going to focus on address improving our monetary and financial management. We are going to also focus on improving the fiscal policy management. we also have to improve on our external and international sector policies.
Director General Dr. Regina Educhum called for a long-term developmental plan to go beyond political regimes to drive economic growth.
That we are saying that we need a long-term national development policy framework, and it is a policy framework that every Ghanaian buys into. So if we agree on that, then different political parties can prepare their manifesto using that, and then Ghanaians can judge a party. Once you come into power, we have all agreed on where we want to go to, and therefore Ghanaians will make sure that you do what you do. But as I indicated, there is a provision in the Constitution that says that every president should prepare his policies and programs and present it to Parliament when he comes into power. And we are saying that that should be removed from the Constitution, because so long as that is in the Constitution, you cannot force any government to do what the previous government did.